This evening's broadcast is brought to you by Home Guys Home Services. Good evening, and thank you for joining us on another broadcast of Port Angeles News. I'm your host, Arthur Wojnowski. Due to technical difficulties, tonight's episode will consist of our continuation with our interview with Councilmember Jim Moran. We hope to have our issue solved by next week's episode to give you a bit more variety of the news. Thank you for understanding, and until next time.
Start off with, where did you grow up?
I grew up in New Jersey, in the beautiful town of Bayonne, New Jersey, and went to Seton Hall University in South Orange, New Jersey. So I'm an East Coast kid.
Okay, and how did you end up in Port Angeles?
Long story or short story? I was an ROTC student at Seton Hall, and so I was commissioned as second lieutenant in the Army, and the Army sent me to flight school, where I learned how to fly helicopters. They sent me to Vietnam, and on my return from Vietnam, I was stationed here in Fort Lewis. Really enjoyed Washington State, so we decided to stay. And left the military, went back to school, got my master's degree in HR from Pacific Lutheran University, and joined a large East Coast financial firm here in Seattle, and I was the district manager there for a number of years. Kind of a long-winded answer to your question, but it's kind of an interesting, serendipitous trip, if you will. We moved to the outskirts of Kent, out towards the foothills, in the vicinity of an old coal mining community called Black Diamond, and we lived there for about 30 years and raised our family there. In 1991, I left the corporate world and started my own company, and so in doing that, our two boys went to Auburn High School, and when they graduated, went on to college, and my oldest son wound up working for Home Depot, and he was transferred to the Home Depot here in Sequim, where he was the operations manager, and he was living in Port Angeles. And we had no knowledge of Port Angeles whatsoever, never had any intention of moving here, but we thought since he was in Port Angeles, we'd come up and see if we could help him buy a home up here. Well, we never did find a home for him, but we wound up finding a home for us. And so we wound up buying a home on the bluff overlooking the Straits and Canada, and just an unbelievable view with a view of the mountains in the background, compared to our home in Kent, which was in the forest. No view whatsoever, just trees. So this was a spectacular view. So through a kind of a serendipitous arrangement, trying to help our son buy a home, we wound up buying a house here and moving to Port Angeles about a little over 10 years ago, and that's how we wound up here. Kind of an interesting story. Never had any ambition, never knew anything about Port Angeles, but it's kind of turned out to be the small city USA that I've been looking for all my life, because having grown up on the East Coast and in the megalopolis there, and also working downtown Seattle and Bellevue and the big city in Seattle and so forth, this was a beautiful change, and so we've really enjoyed it. My wife was teaching at the time, and when she retired, we moved up here full time.
So what was it like, how was it different, what it was like back out on the East Coast to here now?
How is it
for you?
different?
How's it different for you?
Uh, the couple things. First of all, there's trees out here. You know, in the East Coast, if there was one tree standing, they called it a park. And so out here, we just see the greenery and the mountains and the ocean, and it's just an incredibly different environment. One thing that if you're from the East Coast and you come out here, the climate is incredibly different. Back east in the summertime, the humidity is almost palpable. You can pretty much go outside, come back in, feel like you need to take another shower again to go back outside. And in the wintertime, it's you know, really cold and damp, and that kind of wet cold that gets to you. So here the temperature is mild. You know, the climate doesn't vary, or the temperature doesn't vary more than 40 degrees all year long. And if I sound like I'm a member of the Chamber of Commerce, I am. I was president in 2015, so I really find a stark contrast in the weather. Not only the weather, but obviously the pace of life is different here. The people are more readily accepting of new people. On the East Coast, it's a little bit harder to establish friendships than it is here. So there's a really marked contrast between what you see out here, not just in the geography and weather, but also in the pace of life and the type of people that you meet here.
What do you miss from the East Coast that you wish you could have here right now?
Bagels. Can't get a good bagel out here. Seriously, that's pretty much it. I haven't been back to the East Coast in probably 25 years. My wife's family still lives on the East Coast, and so she's been back occasionally to visit, but I haven't. And to be very honest, I don't miss anything. You know, you can go to New York City and get a great, you know, pastrami sandwich, and also a good bagel. But other than that, I don't miss anything. I wouldn't move back there. I wouldn't bring anything that's back there out here. If I could, I'd bring this back there, as opposed to having missed anything from the East Coast. I really, truthfully, don't miss anything. People ask me that quite a bit, by the way. You know, what do you miss about coming out here? My only answer is, you can't find a good bagel out here. You know, but that's about it.
Excuse me, I had a little bit of a scratchy throat today.
Yeah. I know the feeling.
Yeah.
I'm still recovering myself.
Oh, yeah? Okay. So, in the 10 years that you've lived here, how has Port Angeles changed?
How has Port Angeles changed in 10 years? You know, not a great deal, in my opinion. It has, sociologically, I think it's pretty much the same. The tourism is pretty much its mainstay. I have seen a bit of change in the industry. We have the new composite technology site. We have some development up around Fairchild. Logging isn't as much of a mainstay as it used to be. Fishing obviously is not an industry that is relied on anymore. I am a member of I'm on the board of directors of the Historical Society, the Clallam County Historical Society, and so I did that because I wanted to learn about the history of the North Olympic Peninsula, and it's fascinating to learn the history. But I was looking at a census that was taken in 1953 and a city survey that was done in 1953. It was very fascinating because it was on the old typewriter, and it was about 5 volumes long. And after reading it, I thought I had just read something out of yesterday's newspaper. So how has Port Angeles changed? Since the 50s, the population was about 19,000. It's 19,000 today. It's about the same size geographically. So it's an amazing contrast in the sense that it hasn't changed much. If you go back even as far as the 50s, you can find documents that you would have thought they were written yesterday. And so, obviously certain geographical things have changed. Buildings have changed. We've filled in the streets, but overall, the city has pretty much been the same. It still has its blue collar background, which is a strong citizenry, and a lot of people that have moved away from Port Angeles, I find coming back because of what the small town offers. And so, I often tell people, if you want to see what Port Angeles looked like 50 years ago, just walk around town. It's pretty much the same. It really is.
Aside from politics, what other things are you interested in right now?
Oh, good Lord, where do I start? I'm on the board of directors of the New Dungeness Light Station Association, and we transfer and make available light station keepers. So, as a matter of fact, last Saturday I drove a new set of keepers. We take people who want to stay at the New Dungeness Light Station. They stay out there for a week. We transport them along the New Dungeness bit. It's a 5.5 mile trek along the beach. There's no roads. We have specially equipped vehicles that takes them out there. We pick up the keepers that have been there for a week. They literally are keepers of the light station. When people come out to visit, they give them tours, and they live there in old keepers' quarters that was built in 1857. And so the New Dungeness Light Station was the first lighthouse on Puget Sound. The second one was at Tatoosh Light off of Cape Flattery, and that is really, really fascinating. So that has kept me busy. I also drive the senior center bus, and tomorrow I'm taking, I call them the kids, but I'm taking the seniors to the Burke Museum at the University of Washington. So that along with just working basically in different sections of the community. We're working with the Chamber of Commerce right now on putting together the first Port Angeles Maritime Festival, which will be the first weekend in June 9th and 10th. We're going to have the Lady Washington and Hawaiian Chieftain Atoll ships here. The Coast Guard is going to participate. An old Navy tug called the Comanche is going to be here. And so pilot boats will be available. And so those type of things, just being involved. We're involved in the 4th of July parade. Season ticket holder for the lefties. I think that's one of the most dynamic things that has happened to Port Angeles, to have their own baseball team. A tremendous start last year. And so I'm on several boards of directors, and as you know, as a council member, you get to be assigned to various committees: the Marine Resource Committee, the North Olympic Development Council, and so forth. So, but mostly things that involve of interest to me or involve the history and social aspect of Port Angeles. I really enjoy being involved in that. And as I said, the New Dungeness Light Station is almost a hobby. It's great. I'm on the board of directors there, and we meet monthly, and we're responsible for maintaining that light station out there. And so it does take a bit of time. I mean, when you drive out there, it's a couple hours worth of driving, but it's really cool to go out there in all kinds of weather. I've taken a trip out there at 2 o'clock in the morning, So if you imagine driving on sand beach at 2 o'clock in the morning when it's raining, there's a few opportunities for excitement. So I'm not bored. So,
So would it be fair to say your hobbies truly are the community?
I would say that's a fair statement. I really enjoy being involved in this community. It's no longer there. As a matter of fact, the building was recently demolished. But one of my first experiences with Port Angeles, there was a restaurant owned by a character. The only way I can describe him. His name was Ron Shepard, and Ron, when you walked into this little cafe, it was on the marina. The cafe was called The Wharf, and it looked like it was just, he looked like he just stepped out of a Norman Rockwell painting. You know, the greasy apron, you know, the 2-day-old beard, you know, the greasy hat, and this was, it was like Cheers. You go in there, you know, the menus were there only just for decoration because, you know, you sat down, whatever you ordered, Ron was going to serve you whatever you wanted. So, but it was one of those type of things. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but, you know, never, you know, they always knew what you wanted for breakfast, knew who you were. You sat down there, and I went to breakfast once a week there, and there was just a regular crowd there, and it was like, it literally was Cheers, you know. You walk in there, and it was like, Jim, you know. And so that, you know, really, really got me involved in the community. I'm going like, this is, you know, I've been cautioned about saying this, but it was, you know, to me it was my Mayberry RFD, and I don't use that in any derogatory sense. It just was very homey, and so that got me involved. I immediately got involved in what was called the Heritage Days. It was the result of the old Salmon Days Festival, and that's what got me involved in the Historical Society, and gravitated from that to the Chamber. As I said, I was president of the Chamber of Commerce, and I was also on the board of directors of the Senior Center, and so I had to leave that because the city as you know, owns the Senior Center, and so that would have been a conflict of interest, so I had to leave that board. But it's really been a wonderful experience, and you have to have lived on the East Coast and to feel how impersonal that environment can be as to how personal this environment is. It's remarkably refreshing. I don't know if that answers your question or not, but
Yeah. So, what would you say your style for living, or rather, the mantra that you live by?
mantra.
Style, your
Well, my style is semi-retired. I don't know if that's a style. Since 1991, I owned my own company. I owned a pension administration company, and then we did record keeping for profit sharing plans and 401k plans. And in 2015, my junior partner took over the day-to-day operations of the company, which freed up my time to do more of the type of things like get involved in government. This is my first run at that, which is, by the way, been an interesting experience.
we'll get to that.
Yeah, we'll get to that. I'm sure we will. But you know, so we've been, my wife and I have been fortunate to be able to travel. We've done a fair amount of traveling. We're going, you know, we're going to Hawaii in May, and so I still, you know, I still do some pro bono work as a consultant to several nonprofit organizations, so I keep my hand in the business, but I'm not actively involved in it. So, you know, semi-retired is probably, I don't know if that's a mantra or a lifestyle, but you know, it's you make your own schedule. Although the city has been tending to make my schedule for me more and more. but you know, I'm not tied to the desk as much as I was before, and so I like the opportunity to be involved in organizations that I have interest in. I only go to meetings that I'm interested in. I don't go to meetings that just because I need to show up or something like that. So if I'm not interested in the subject matter of the meeting, I don't go. And so that semi-retired status has afforded me that luxury. And so.
So what are you proud of? What are you most proud of in your personal life?
Well, actually, my two boys, I guess. You know, as a parent, you're always going to say that. I mean, my two sons are, they're successful in their own right. My oldest son has a beautiful wife, and we have our first grandchild who's going on 2 years old, who's just a handful. And my youngest son is a food science major, is working with a small coffee roasting company in Seattle, and they're both doing well, and so that's probably one of the things that I'm most proud of. I have to tell you, one of the things I am most proud of, I officiated basketball for 25 years. And in 2014, I was awarded the Washington Officials Association Meritorious Service Award for officiating. And it was a nice ceremony and annual conference in Yakima, Washington, and I was awarded that. And I think that's one of the things I'm most proud of being recognized by the state of Washington Officials Association for my work as an official and as a trainer of officials for 25 years. And so that's also one of my, and right among there is being married to my wife Marie for 48 years. So I have to put that in there or else I'll get in trouble. But you know, I always feel really, really good about that state award that I was given, and so that's probably one of my more proudest achievements. Yeah.
What kind of things or people do you avoid?
What kind of people do I avoid?
Or things?
I avoid cats because I'm allergic to them. It's hard, that's a hard question because, first of all, you can't avoid anybody in this town. I mean, Port Angeles is such a small community in a certain extent. My wife teases me, it's hard for me to walk down an aisle in Safeway without bumping into somebody and winding up in a conversation. And truth be told, I enjoy that. I really do. That's one of the things that has made politics, if you will, enjoyable for me. Is, I recognize people, people recognize me, and we literally have a chat, seriously, without exaggeration, it's hard for me to go to the store like Safeway without bumping into somebody I know, and that's hard to find in any place else, and I really enjoy that. So I can't think of any person or any type of person or personality that I really tend to avoid. I haven't really experienced that. Back in the East Coast, there were certain people that growing up and in my college days, and when I was in the corporate world and I would go back, there were certain types of people that I tended to try to avoid. The people that were looking to, you know, self-aggrandize type of people, you know, who were self-promoters, that type of thing. In the corporate world, I saw a lot of that, and I tried to avoid those type of people because they just weren't sincere. I don't find that here. I really don't. And there isn't anybody. And if I tried to avoid them, they track me down anyway. So I don't do that. But I am allergic to cats, so I stay away from cats.
Fair enough. By the way, if you need to take a break or something, just let me know.
Okay, no, fine.
So let's move on, not avoiding things. What kind of things do you think deeply of, or what keeps you up at night?
What keeps me up at night?
Or what puts you into deep thought that you say?
Boy, I don't think I've ever had a deep thought. You know, certain things that that I've come across, and you've noticed for having been on the campaign trail. There are certain things that I've learned about Port Angeles and experienced that when I first got here, I was more interested in the history and the background of the community and learning about that. And that was fascinating. But as I got more involved in the fabric of the community, especially as I got more into the political side of it, and politics is really sometimes used, you know, as a bad adjective, but it really is merely a vision of society, I think. And so, but the problems that we face in Port Angeles, and I know we're not unique, but you know, I see the homelessness, and I see the drug addiction, and I've seen you know, those type of things, and certain issues that we face on the city council. I have to tell you one thing that has gotten me up recently is this vote that we had last night on the plastic bag issue. I understand the need for reducing plastic pollution in the environment. I really do, but I think we're going about it in the wrong way. And so I was kind of agonizing how to present a position that we're going about it the wrong way, in my opinion. And so you kind of lay awake at night trying to figure out how can you get your point across. You want to be effective, but at the same time, it can be a bigger issue, and one of the things that also has kept me up at night is just thinking about is a couple of weeks ago I had the privilege, and if you remember my council report last night, I was at this groundbreaking ceremony where these 6 families were going to build their own homes. They were literally going to turn the dirt, hammer the nails, and just the joy and the excitement that these 6 families had, and the opportunity to get their own American dream, and it was great to see that. The problem is it took them almost 2.5 years to get to this point. And why? Because of these onerous, ridiculous, in my opinion, regulations, specifically stormwater regulations that these people had to face. We get these constant messages that we don't have enough low-income housing, we have housing shortages, and things of this nature. This is, maybe this is the politician that I've become, but On the other hand,